Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to the Human Beauty Movement podcast, your source for hope, healing, happiness, and humanity. My name is Jennifer Norman. I'm the founder of the Human Beauty Movement and your host. This podcast is here to guide you on your journey of self-love, empowerment, soul alignment, and joy. With each episode, I invite beautiful humans from all corners of the globe to join me for open conversations about their life lessons and the important work that they are doing to help heal humankind. Take a moment now to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. I'm so glad you're here joining me for today's show. Today, we're tackling an issue many of us face, the struggle to bring more authenticity or realness into our lives. If you've ever felt stuck, held back by your own beliefs, or disconnected from your true self, then this episode is for you. Today's guest is someone who has dedicated his life to helping people overcome these exact challenges. Oli Anderson is an author and coach who specializes in guiding individuals to get out of their own way and make real choices that lead to wholeness and tangible results. Oli's work focuses on cultivating realness, learning to listen to yourself, acting on the truth, and creating a life that reflects your authentic self. Oli is the author of Personal Revolutions, a short course in realness, and Shadow Life, Freedom from BS in an Unreal World. So in this episode, Oli will share insights from his personal journey, the universal themes he's discovered through his coaching work, and practical advice on how you can start bringing more realness into your life. We'll explore how to identify and overcome the beliefs that are holding you back and how to take aligned action that brings real results. By the end of this conversation, you'll have a clearer understanding of how to tune into your natural drives toward wholeness and real growth. So whether you're an artist, an entrepreneur, or somebody who simply is looking to experience life on a deeper level, Oli's wisdom will help you start making meaningful choices today. So without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome to the show, Oli.
Jennifer, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to explore all this stuff with you. I got to say that was a remarkable introduction, and I hope I can live up to that. It was like my obituary or something. I think that was... it was good. It summed up a lot of things. But anyway, yeah, sorry.
Well, the good thing is that you're not dead yet. You're here, and we get to talk about... we get to talk about realness. And so I guess my first question for you is what to you does realness mean, and why do you think it's such a central theme in what you're doing as far as your work?
I'm going to try and reel myself in because I have a tendency to just unleash so many things when I start talking about this. So for me, ultimately, realness boils down to three things. It used to be 2 steps that I always gave. Now it's 3. So basically, it's about uncovering the truth and then accepting the truth and then living and breathing the truth. When I'm coaching people, I go through a related process. It's awareness, acceptance, and action. Ultimately, realness is about accepting life and ourselves to the greatest degree available to us. I think we can always go deeper into it because we always have, I guess, unconscious blocks, conscious blocks, limiting beliefs, all these kind of things. But as we go through the course of our lives, if we can try and stay grounded in this attitude of constantly uncovering the truth, accepting the truth, and then living and breathing the truth, then we can get a deeper connection, ideally day by day, to ourselves, other people, and the world. And so if I was going to sum it all up, I would say that realness is ultimately about acceptance, but it also involves the journey into a deeper sense of acceptance. It always leads to wholeness, which is about connection. That's ultimately how I see it. I don't know if that's too complicated.
Not at all, but I know that you have an interesting personal journey that led you there because as most people, you find your purpose through your own experiences and you come to this big aha moment, as it were, and then you realize, wow, the way that I was living before is not the way that I wanted to. And so can you tell us a little bit about your own personal journey and how that shaped your understanding and commitment to realness?
Yeah. So I learned a lot of these lessons about realness due to some health issues that I had. Mm-hmm. The short version of the long story is that I ended up getting kidney failure. I've still got kidney failure, so I've been on dialysis for 17 years and counting. Mm-hmm. very healthy despite that, believe it or not. Obviously, I've got no kidneys that work, but like
Yeah.
I live a very healthy life, like eat healthy food and I do yoga every day and I work out and go hiking, all these kind of things. I'm in a very good place now because I learned these lessons about realness. Ultimately, it gave me the stronger foundation of acceptance on which to build my life now. Early on though, when I first experienced this issue with kidney failure, I basically went through what everyone likes to call the dark night of the soul. Ultimately, I see it as a kind of tunnel. And like, I kind of went into the tunnel with one set of ideas about who I was, what life was, how it all works. And as I went through that tunnel and came out the other side, I ultimately it was kind of like a vortex, let's say, and it just shaved off all these layers of kind of fragmentary illusions and unreal beliefs that were keeping me from seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, which sounds very poetic, and I'm bringing death into it again. But ultimately, I learned it because when I first was diagnosed with a kidney failure, I went into a situation with an identity or version of myself that was kind of misaligned with the truth about who I actually was. And it was only by facing and learning to accept that I had this illness and that I might not live as long as I thought I was going to live and blah, 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 blah. It was only by learning to accept all of that stuff that I was able to hold up all of my outdated beliefs and everything in the light of that truth. And at first, my tendency was to resist. Like I was trying to cling to the old version of myself. I suppose for context, I should add like, so when I first got diagnosed with the illness, I was actually living in Tokyo in Japan. I had a really kind of, like a high flying kind of life. Like I was doing like modeling and TV extra work and all this kind of stuff. Didn't really have the normal day-to-day responsibilities that people have. I was just out there traveling the world and climbing Mount Fuji and all these kind of things. And then all of a sudden, I thought I had flu, but it turned out to be something much worse. And I had to basically leave this life I had in Japan and come back to the UK where I'm from so I could get a kidney transplant. That sucked in itself for various reasons. But then when I did have the kidney transplant, that went totally wrong. So the short version of that long story is connect the kidney to your artery. For some reason, when they connected it, it just burst. I lost loads of blood. I was in a coma, all this kind of stuff. I was going to say that wasn't that bad. Obviously, it was bad. That was like awful. But the worst part was having to rebuild my life after that. Because I always thought like, right, I'm going to get this kidney transplant and then I'll basically go back to normal life. Like I'll be able to go back to Japan if I want and I can be with my girlfriend or get married, have a normal life and blah, 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 blah. When the kidney burst, it basically just put me on a trajectory from bad to worse. Like as dramatic as it sounds, like ultimately, because the kidney transplant went wrong, they gave me loads of blood transfusions. I had like 37 blood transfusions, something like that. Ooh. Yeah, like I'm very lucky to be here. But anyway, normally when you're on dialysis, they try not to give you blood transfusions because it makes it harder to get another kidney. The average waiting time in the UK to get a kidney transplant is about 2 years. I've been on dialysis for 17 years because that original kidney transplant was 15 years ago. Because I had all these blood transfusions, I've got like an immunity basically to like pretty much I'll reject every kidney that they give me. It's very hard for me to get one. Yeah, so for that reason, I've been on dialysis ever since. At first, that was one of those things where it's like, oh my God, like if I look at who I was 15 years ago, when I realized I might still be on dialysis today, there was so much resistance, like all of these thoughts that you get, like these kind of ego-driven thoughts. I say ego-driven because I think the ego is anything that causes you to resist the way that things actually are and to get you to try and control things that you can't control. What I've learned is it was totally out of my control. And actually being where I am now is actually amazing. Like, even though I'm still on dialysis, like I've got my own business and like I go hiking every weekend and like, just everything's awesome. And when I was there, like I was just really kind of in this emotional quagmire of resistance. I was just thinking like I'm being punished for something or it's so unfair that this has happened. And all of these interpretations that we try and put on the situation to try and deal with our emotional stuff. Like really what I've learned is like all of those thoughts were stopping me from really just embracing and deep acceptance of the situation and the way that things were. The reason I was resisting it was because if I did actually accept that new reality that I found myself in, I had to let go of that old identity that I'd become attached to of, myself who was traveling in Tokyo and doing all these things, or, even just the vision that I might have had for the future and all those different things that we get attached to, our expectations and ideals and all that stuff. And it just went. And like, by letting it go, I found a strange kind of peace. Like, as I don't want to sound like I'm trying to be all enlightened or something, but like the end result of letting go of all of that stuff and just accepting things for what they were really like freed me. And I started to feel like better than I'd ever felt. Like literally I had so much energy and like I was just focused on where I wanted to go. And I was really thinking about like, okay, back then, I didn't think I'd still be alive now, like to be totally honest. Like I thought I was in the worst case scenario. I was like, oh my God, this kidney transplant's gone wrong. And the life expectancy on dialysis is 5 years. Back then, I didn't know that it's 5 years because most people on dialysis are already really old. So I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be dead in 5 years. What are we going to do? And like, at first, I just had to really confront all of my fears. But then I realized you can't lose anything real. All the things I was afraid of losing, I'd already lost anyway because they were just things I was attached to because of my like ego, basically. I keep using this word ego. And ultimately, that all taught me about realness because it showed me that a lot of the things we're holding onto are not real at all, but we give them so much importance. We put these fragments on a pedestal and we treat them as the whole of life. But the whole of life is this relationship with life where life is constantly calling you out of yourself. It's constantly calling you forward, but it doesn't always meet our expectations of what that might look like. And if we can let go of our own expectations and we can learn to really go with what actually is, then it always leads to this place of wholeness because the final lesson, like I keep saying, I guess, is always acceptance. And the only thing you can accept is the truth. And the only thing that is going to happen if you accept the truth is it's going to connect you to other people and life because we're all sharing this crazy human experience, but it's going to connect you to yourself as well. And then you can kind of combine the two and you can kind of create a purpose for yourself, I guess, where this sounds very dramatic, but you're using the time that you have to serve others and to just be in life without worrying about life. I can rant and rave all day about this stuff, but like,
yeah, what a beautiful story about your journey. And it is one that I think is a bit familiar, perhaps not in the health condition itself, but in the fact that I think a lot of people go through life and then they build up ego and they get to this place where they look back and they're like, I just feel like there's such dissonance between the real me and the one that is for show, or the one that is status oriented, or the one that keeps striving for this something which is leaving me feeling unfulfilled. And so what you were able to do through a horrible situation, frankly, but it is one that I think when you are faced with death, when you are faced with health, there's this very profound statement from the Romans. It might have been Marcus Aurelius' time, which is Memento Mori. You're probably familiar with it because I know you love Stoicism, which is we're all going to die. Remember, we are all going to die.
Yeah.
And it's not to be morose or it's not to be morbid. It's really just to say, you know what, enjoy your life. Be real. Life is too short to live somebody else's life or to not live it with gusto to the way that you want to be. Life is too short. So remember, we're all going to die. And then at the end, you can't take it with you. So why not do this work now? You don't have to wait for some traumatic event or some precipice, dark night of the soul in order to do it. You can start where you are and really continue to have a relationship with yourself where you know yourself.
Yeah.
I certainly felt like I wasn't able to do that for the longest time. Being in the beauty industry, it's nothing but facade for a lot of it. And you end up feeling like your life becomes a bit superficial. So I'd love to turn to how you coach, and I know that you've written books on this, about how the steps that you put forth to your clients and to people who are reading your book, how does that help to get back to real? I know that a lot of people will say, I don't even know who I am. I don't even know, like when you say, who are you? They're like, I have no clue. You know, they'll say, I'm an accountant, I'm a banker, they'll point to their occupation as to who they are, but that's not really them. How do you point them back to them?
Yeah. So normally it goes through a process of awareness, acceptance, and action. The first step to change, like in any transformational journey, is always awareness. That's a common thing in the world of coaching, and you can't really take anyone on these journeys or guide them without raising their awareness. Ultimately, it comes down to raising awareness of exactly what you just said, which is the distinction between the kind of superficial or conditioned version of ourselves that we have created to just survive life, running around on autopilot, versus who we really are when we slow down and we test our assumptions about all of the things we've been chasing and that we think are going to bring meaning to our lives. What you said about death is really important. Memento Mori. I think a lot of people, because they're running around as a consequence or reaction to their own conditioning, they've never really just paused to reflect on what it is that they really want. A quote that I'm always throwing out is by Abraham Maslow. He said, knowing what we really want in life is a rare psychological achievement. And I think that's so true. Like most people, it's not that it's difficult to find out what we really want. It's just that we take it for granted. We think that the values of society, like the ones that I'm sure you've kind of witnessed people chasing in the beauty industry, for example, or around profit and greed and all these kind of capitalistic values that we tend to chase as a culture, we think that they're our values, but they're not our values. They're just something that we've taken on board because of our culture, and then we've internalized it as our own kind of compass. And so we've all got this thing inside us that's just leading us in totally the wrong direction. And then what happens, because we're following somebody else's path, is we end up in a situation where we just feel completely restless. We feel like there's an itch that needs to be scratched, but we don't know how to scratch it. And we feel like we might be getting results in life, like maybe we've got a nice job or we've got a partner or whatever it is that we thought we wanted, but it's only at that superficial level. And the reason it's superficial is because we've only been setting goals for ourselves at the level of the identity we've picked up because of the world and our external conditioning. And so for me, in answer to your question, the first step of the journey is just looking at some of our blind spots, raising awareness of some of the maybe unconscious patterns, like the things that keep showing up in our lives that are trying to teach us things. For example, the same relationship problems popping up again and again, the same emotional problems popping up again and again. Looking at things where maybe we're telling ourselves that we want something. So maybe common ones are like, people might tell themselves that they want to start a new business. It never gets any traction. They might tell themselves that they want to find a new partner, but they keep meeting people and then pushing them away, or it's the wrong kind of person. Maybe they keep telling themselves they want to like get healthy and lose weight or whatever it is, but it just doesn't happen. If there's something like that where people are constantly telling themselves that they want a specific result, but they're not getting it, then you can bet your bottom dollar that there's some unconscious intention beneath the surface that is actually driving them much more. So for example, if you take the common example of people want to get more clients for their business and they're always talking about doing it, but they never actually do it, probably they've got an unconscious intention that's causing them to avoid the fear of being seen as an imposter, or they're trying to avoid being salesy and all that kind of stuff, showing up as a cheesy salesperson or whatever it is. The unconscious intentions are always guiding our lives much more. If you can understand that, then you can start to kind of reverse engineer the relationship that people have with themselves at the level of their beliefs and their identity and see what's actually driving them. And then you can start bringing that to the surface. That's going to allow basically, I'm going to start ranting a little bit now. It's going to allow the shadow self to start emerging, ultimately. This is where my rant begins about the shadow self and the ego. So the way that I look at this, part of raising awareness is understanding that the ego is something that we've created as a reaction to our underlying shame, guilt, and trauma. Shame is probably the most common driver in the world. When people are driven by shame, what they end up doing is they abolish or try to hide from the things that were shamed in the first place. So let's take something simple. Let's say somebody was a kid and they were painting pictures and they showed it to their parents, and their parents said, "Oh, this is terrible. This is the worst picture I've ever seen in my life." And because of that, the kid becomes ashamed of their creativity. They screw up the artwork, they throw it in the bin. And then 30 years later down the line, they're still detached from their creativity because they've created a version of themselves, like an ego version, that is a fragmented version of who they are because they split off from their creativity when they were age 7 or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. That creativity never went anywhere because it's real. I believe what's real is always real. We're just either connected to it or we're not. And so when you start raising awareness of the identities that people have created for themselves, I keep doing this little box thing because I see the ego as like a little box. When you raise awareness of that and you start to break through some of the cracks and look at some of the unconscious stuff that's going on, these real things start emerging again because there's a common saying, like it's always getting thrown around in coaching circles. Emotions are energy in motion. The thing that stops the emotions moving is the ego. The only thing you can really block an emotion with is like a mental construct, which is what the ego is made of. Fragmented emotional constructs. And so once you start poking around at that stuff and raising awareness that it's not real, well, then the real stuff starts moving again. That gets you onto the second stage. So I've just spent loads of time rambling about the awareness part, sorry. But once you've raised that awareness, you have to start accepting the things that your lack of awareness was blocking. And that means that you're ultimately going to become reconnected to your real values, your real intentions, your real drives, all these things that have probably always been there, but they've just been blocked behind this kind of the mental filter of the ego that we became attached to and started to identify with. Once you become accepting of that stuff, that's when you can start taking action, like real action, because the action that you're going to take is going to be aligned with your newfound awareness, but also with an acceptance of who you really are. And even though I'm describing it as kind of a linear process, awareness, acceptance, action, it's kind of cyclical, like you can hop around through these stages and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, the path is kind of linear. Like you have to start with acceptance and you have to finish in this place. If you ever can really finish, that's a strange word to use, but you have to end up in this place where you're constantly taking this inspired action that is aligned with what you found when you started digging beneath the surface and sort of raised awareness and got that foundation. In relation to wholeness and fragmentation, I have really found that a lot of, like at the start of these journeys, if someone comes to you for coaching or something like that, they're coming for a reason. Normally, they're not 100% happy with life and everything's puppy dogs and rainbows. They've got that restless feeling, or they've got that itch, or they've reached some kind of a crunch point where they feel like they need to change their lives. And so they're going to have some kind of emotional symptoms, like maybe they're beating themselves up, or they're anxious, or they feel like they're missing out on their potential, or whatever it is. Those symptoms only exist at the start of these transformational journeys because they've become fragmented within themselves and they're holding on to this little box, the ego, which is built of fragments anyway. Once they go through the process and they start accepting themselves and letting go of the beliefs, etc., that are causing them to be fragmented, they really tune into this natural drive towards wholeness that we all have anyway. I have really found in my own life and with my clients that once you start to accept yourself and you stop blocking that self-acceptance with the ego stuff, then it kind of just starts happening organically anyway, because we're all constantly moving towards wholeness. We have this inner drive to move towards wholeness, which is just connection to ourselves, connection to other people, and connection to life. When we're resisting it because of our fear ultimately and lack of trust in ourselves and life because of the ego stuff, that's when we keep clinging to all these unreal things, and that causes this inner friction that causes the kind of problems people have at the start of these transformational journeys. So for me, awareness, acceptance, and action, and it's all just about moving deeper and deeper into the truth. When you get to the end stage, you trust yourself more and you trust life more, and so you can take action that's more real, which means it's going to get you results because it's not all filtered through the ego stuff.
Wow. Thank you for that very deep explanation. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is very deep work, as you can tell. This is something that not enough people in the world go through in terms of an exercise. I think that there's a lot of unconsciousness, a lot of autopiloting where we just kind of do as we're told, or we go through life thinking that life is supposed to be a certain way and we're not supposed to rock the boat. And then we kind of feel like, who am I? What, gets into this existential crisis. And so finding this discovery about patterns, things that come up, issues, concerns, blockages is really, really important for you to be able to know yourself a little bit better. Coaching definitely helps to be able to uncover that, because it's not easy to do by yourself. I don't know if anybody really has the discipline enough to just sit with themselves and go through shadow work.
Yeah.
And then be able to map out all of the steps to take inspired action towards yourself so that you're not barking up the wrong tree. You're ending up on the right tree, the one that was meant for you, and you can live your life to your fullest expression of self-actualization, as it were.
Yeah.
And the point that you brought up as far as it being a continuous cycle, this is true. It's not like a one and done sort of situation, because it's a practice. It's like life is a journey. It's a practice. It's something that we continuously will check and nurture and grow and evolve. And every day there'll be a new challenge or something to think about. And even when you're halfway up that tree, you might be like, oh, there's a branch. Do I go take that branch? Is that the right one? Or, there's always decision points. There's always forks in the road. And if you are able to do that work, that gut check, that will automatically tell you, no, this is right for me. You'll be on the right path rather than feeling like you veered off onto a life that really wasn't your own.
Yeah.
I think that it's interesting that some people might say, okay, well, I'm taking inspired action and maybe those actions are leading me to want the bigger house. And then they might step back and say, well, isn't that ego? Aren't all of the things that I might be craving in life, like, how do I know if they are truly real or if I'm just trying to put a ruse over what that is with this ego that will always be with us? Because if you're human, you have an ego. We do in a way to survive and to know the difference between Oli and Jen. So can you describe how you coach people to continue on a path of true inspired action?
Yeah. So I think it's really important what you just said, that we all have an ego. I think we can't kill the ego. Like, I'm not one of those super spiritual guys that thinks we can just dissolve the ego into absolute nothingness and just obliterate ourselves. The ego is useful because it helps us to survive in the world. It only causes problems when we think that it's who we are and we become attached to it and treat it as a fixed entity. I think we need to put it in the back seat so that our realness and experience of being is kind of in the driving seat and moving us forward. I think if we can do that, then we can get to the point that I think you're kind of alluding to around inspired action, where, have you heard of the Taoist concept of Wu Wei? So it's where we can basically learn to want things without wanting them, and it allows us to stay in the flow. For me, it all comes down really, when moving forward, to two different states. We're either flowing with life, which means that we're responding to life as it happens. We're navigating based on, whatever obstacles arise, whatever branches need climbing as we go up that tree. We're responding from a place of wholeness and being grounded in our understanding of the truth, versus the alternative version, which is where we're forcing things. Forcing means that we want something so much that we become so focused, obsessed with the goal, that we can't actually look at life as it's happening around us and be engaged in the process of living. And so for me, when I'm coaching people around the challenge that you just mentioned, which is wanting more things in life or moving towards more things in life without taking ourselves out of this process of moving towards wholeness and maintaining perspective on the way there, I basically tell people two things. One is that once you know what the goal is, so say you want that new house or you want that Lamborghini or whatever, once you know what the goal is, you can actually let go of the goal. You can detach from the goal. You can take your identity out of getting there, and you can realize that whether you reach that goal or not has absolutely no effect on your levels of self-acceptance. Like, actually, whether you get that thing or you don't get that thing, you're still whole. You're still connected to truth. You're still connected to life. And it has no effect on how valuable you are as a person or your self-esteem or any of that stuff. If you do think reaching that goal is going to hold the key to you finally feeling good about yourself, or you finally feeling like other people are going to respect you and you're going to get all this external validation or whatever it is that you think it's going to do for you, then ultimately you've turned the goal into a kind of magical unicorn, and you're projecting all of the qualities that you've denied within yourself onto this thing. And it's just another way of keeping it at arm's length, I think, so that you don't have to face your shadow. So basically what I'm saying is all the things that are hiding in the shadow, like say self-worth, which was there anyway until you became split from yourself and fragmented. Your self-worth is always there. Your self-acceptance is always there. But because your ego at present is detached from it, it puts it onto that goal. So it puts it onto that house, whatever it is, and says, right, if you can get this house, finally, you can feel good about yourself. So basically, if we can accept that that is our goal, but instead detach from the goal, take our emotional goodwill towards ourselves out of the equation, and just focus on the process of moving towards it, then in a strange kind of way, the process of living becomes both the goal and the process, if that makes sense. Like, we're making it all just one experience rather than having this kind of goal just hovering above us as something that may or may not solve all our problems. Mm-hmm. I think if you can do that and you can take your identity out of it, then the second thing of the two things I was going to say, so the first thing is taking your identity away from the goal. The second thing is knowing that if you can't be happy without something, then you won't be happy with it. So if you're not happy right now because you're detached from yourself, you're not moving towards wholeness and blah, blah, blah. If you're not happy without it, then you're not going to be happy with it. You'll probably be more unhappy because
So true.
you'll be worried about losing it, or you'll be worried about someone taking it away, or you'll still have this inner void because you haven't done this inner work that we're talking about. So if you understand that, then you can basically flip the script. You can start to do the inner work first, because you can always start to cultivate that healthy relationship with yourself. And if you take it to the level of values and awareness and all the things we're talking about, probably you're chasing that goal, that house, because it's the embodiment of certain values. Values can be kind of manifest in all kinds of different ways, myriad ways. So say you want to get that house because it's going to give you a sense of freedom or something. Well, that value of freedom, there'll be things right now that you can do anyway to still bring that same value into your life. And so if you understand it at that level, you don't need the house. It's just something that you want as an expression of yourself. And so if you can see it as that, an expression of what's already real, instead of something that's going to make you feel real, then I think it solves that problem of inspired action, because you're not taking the action to compensate for anything. You're just taking the action to express more of what you already have and what you're already grateful for. And I think if you can understand it like that, then you've got some real perspective. That's how I see it.
Amazing. So I want to pause there for a moment, because I think here is the place where we can identify for some of our listeners how they might be feeling or thinking in order to be able to build this kind of self-awareness of how they're living their lives, the choices that they're making. So the first thing is, if you're doing something because you want to impress, because you're like, okay, if I get this house or if I get this Lamborghini, people are going to be like, whoa, look at that person. Oh, and envy. If you're doing it because you want people to envy you or to be jealous of what you have, that is an ego-based decision. That is probably not the real you coming through. It's probably something that is covering up or overcompensating for a deficiency in a feeling of self-worth or shame or lack that you're feeling inside. If you are going through the motions and saying like, well, I'm a young kid, I just got out of college, I'm trying to get a job, and this is all that's here for me, and so I must go into this clerical job because it's entry level, it's all that I can do. If you go into that and you're saying, well, this is my life path now, without saying like, okay, well, this is a stepping stone, because life is never going to be perfect unless you get to that place where you've ultimately made it perfect. But so long as you're still putting out those cues that I really want to do music, I really want to do art, or I really want to be a scientist, like this is my choice, then you will be able to take inspired action while you've got this day job, which is going to help get you to where you want to be. And knowing that it's just temporary, this is really just you being able to manage through life as life is happening to get to a place that is more a full expression of yourself. If you feel a compulsion that I want to, if you're a boy and you want to wear makeup, and it's something that like your family absolutely would be horrified by. If you're not being artistic, if you're not being creative, if you're feeling stymied because of what others might think, that is also an indication that you're not being real with yourself. And you probably know that already. But finding avenues of places where you can still love those people around you and also live out to your fullest expression. And so there are a few cues that will ultimately get you there. Health and happiness and your relationships and your feelings of connection. Like if you're feeling like your decisions are positively integrating with those senses of connectivity, then you're on the right track. If, however, you're feeling like it's depleting your health in the long run, it's depleting your relationships in the long run, because there's always going to be ebbs and flows here and there in the course of life. But if overall your actions are creating rifts or they're creating positive thriving, that's when you know that you're on a sense of real for yourself. Do you have anything to add to that, Oli?
No, I love everything you just said. Like, I think that's the ultimate barometer. If your relationships are thriving, including your relationship with yourself, and you keep flowing, then that's the key indicator that you are on the right path, that you're moving with reality instead of against it. The opposite of that way of being is that you're so attached to kind of proving yourself to the world or impressing people with whatever goals it is you set for yourself, that you're not flowing, but you're constantly like hitting a brick wall. You're constantly getting feedback from life that something needs to change, but you're not making those changes. I think that's why a lot of people end up burned out in many cases, not all cases, because they're so attached to needing to show up in a certain way so that they can be seen in a certain way by others, that life is constantly, it's asking them to course correct, but they don't necessarily learn the lessons and let go and start moving in a slightly different direction. You can still move towards the same vision overall, but they don't make those little course corrections and adjustments that are going to allow them to grow internally so they can get better results externally. But ultimately, yeah, it all comes down to flow, I think.
It's interesting, the conversation about flow. I know that within a lot of the spiritual community, there is a feeling like, oh, if it's hard, because life isn't supposed to be hard, like then you're not in flow or you're not living your truth. And I would like to counter that, because I think that certainly my perspective is that life shouldn't be about suffering. Like, I don't think that you should suffer through life. However, there are going to be moments of life where you're building skill, where you're obtaining resources. Going out and hunting for your food is not an easy thing, but you can say, I'm enjoying the process of doing it. It's not easy, but I really feel like it's fulfilling and it's rewarding. The work unto itself is the reward. Then if you can look at it that way, and if you feel that way about it, then I think that you're probably on the right track. If you're shunning hard work, or if you're shunning anything that isn't flow, then that is going to be a bit more difficult to survive in as a human on earth.
Yeah. Like 100%. Like, I think some people are so open-minded that their brains fall out when it comes to the flow stuff. Like, and it becomes they have like this idealized version of what it means to flow with life that actually is a way of keeping them in a kind of passive state. Like, ultimately, it's a way of avoiding the law of cause and effect. The way that I like to describe what you just talked about is that initially, in those initial stages, there's like 3 little shifts. They're all the same thing, but you have to go from force before you can flow. You have to put effort in before it becomes effortless. And you have to put conscious attention on things before it becomes unconscious. Mm-hmm. So you reach that stage of unconscious competence. And I'm glad you brought that up, obviously, because I was sounding like one of those hippies there where it's like, you know, we can just let go and flow with the universe. Actually, to start building momentum, you have to put that effort in. You have to force things a little bit in the sense of giving them a nudge or overcoming your old habitual ways of thinking and believing that are stopping you from getting to that point, or like upskilling and developing certain qualities. And I think it comes down to the 3 levels that always pop up in coaching. There's the comfort zone, the stretch zone, and the panic zone. So I don't know if you've heard that before. That's just a thing that I heard somewhere. But like the comfort zone, obviously we all know what that is. If you're in the comfort zone and you believe in flow, well, you're going to try and find ways to make flow seem like it's, you know, the universe trying to keep you in your comfort zone, because you don't want to face your emotional stuff. You don't want to grow through whatever it is that you need to grow through. And
that becomes an epidemic of unresiliency. When you say, like, softness is because you haven't built up that callus, as it were, to life.
Yeah. And like actually building up that callus is what allows you to kind of really keep flowing, I guess, because you can see things. A callus just means, I guess, you've been exposed to reality so many times that it doesn't bother you anymore, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so guitarist knows.
yeah, like that's a perfect example. Like, actually a very perfect example, because like when you're first learning the guitar, it's not like you just pick it up and you can magically play like, I don't know, it's a great symphony or something like that. You have to put effort into it. You learn the chords, you learn the scales, you learn all the finger positions, etc. And then eventually you get to this point where the effort you've put in becomes effortless. Like, ultimately, that's like a law of life, I suppose. Like, if you want to get the results, you have to work with life. And that's a great example of the kind of universal things we all have to deal with.
Right. Right. And again, not to try to conflate the idea of the suffering and that aspect that life is always going to be that way. It's that when you're able to take inspired action and know that it's something that is really based on something that you love and something that really lights you up, then you'll be willing to put in the hours. You'll be willing to build up those calluses on your fingers to start playing. It'll start tracking your time and analyzing. You'll start measuring your improvements. You'll start getting that positive momentum to that place where things are getting to flow. And then flow is where you're performing. It's not where you're learning, and it's not where you're building up your talents and you're building up your skill in order to arrive at a place of excellence. Because I think that what we all want to do is strive for excellence in our life that is aligned with our inner beings, that is aligned with our realness. And so, getting yourself on track is the first step, like building that awareness so that you can build out that life of your own creation that really does express and manifest into the way that you want, and that you can feel like that ultimate joy. I think that is where this work can be truly beneficial. And then after that, I know that some of the things that you do, Ali, are you work with brands and businesses because you are a creative performance coach, and you do help people to really kind of build out companies or brands or associations, extensions of themselves, which are reflections of their true nature. Can you walk us through the process that you use with your clients to help them on this path of creative performance?
Yeah. So the short version of that is I've got a tool that I created that I use with my business coaching clients. It's called the Truth Bomb Brand Design Canvas. If people Google it, you can download it for free. There's like an online tutorial I made that walks you through it. Ultimately, the whole point of this tool is helping people to design something, a creative project or a business, that is aligned with two things. First of all, who they really are and the things that they care about. So their realness, let's say, just for brevity. The second thing is that it's aligned with human nature. Human nature, in this case, simply means that human beings are tribal creatures. So you need to design around a community, but also human beings are all on this path that we keep talking about of going deeper and deeper into wholeness. And so if you can understand that human beings are constantly growing and evolving, and that your creative business or whatever business it is can feed into that growth process, then you can create something that's much more valuable for your audience, basically. So this tool that I use at the start of the business coaching journey is the Truth Bomb Brand Design Canvas, like I said. It goes through 4 different stages. Substance, style, communication, and community. It all comes down to the substance arm, ultimately. Like, substance is really just diving deep and figuring out what your business really means in terms of realness to other people. So the first question is basically a bunch of questions at each level. The first question is about values. So it all comes back to values, really. If you know your real values, then ultimately you can design those values into everything else to do with your business. You can design it into your marketing. You can design it into the service delivery. You can design it into the way that you relate to people, the way that you communicate with people, etc. So if you understand your values, that's the starting point of substance. There's other stuff in there, like, what are you really helping people with? It could be anything, really. Like, let's say somebody has a coffee shop. Like, that's a very simple kind of business, right? If somebody goes to your coffee shop, they're not just going to your coffee shop for a cup of coffee. They're going because it's an experience to reconnect to their friends and to have some deep conversations and maybe to be seen at a certain place in a certain way and etc, etc. If you dig deep into what you're really providing people and you understand that and you're aware of it, because again, awareness, acceptance, action, you can deliver to people something that they actually really connect with and that they really want, but also that's going to help them grow in the way they want to. So I'll give you the abridged version. So substance is what the business really means to you and the people that you serve. Style is basically just about like the more standard branding. So what does it look like? How do you take that substance and translate it into a style that is going to resonate with the people in your audience? I often describe it as like the bat signal. So like the bat signal calls Batman. If you understand your substance, then you can design your branding in such a way that when people see it, it's going to attract the right people. So for example, if you're a creative person and you've got a creative business, you're trying to attract other creative people, there's no point having like a really dull logo that would belong to an accountancy agency or something like that. It needs to reflect who you are. So that's the abridged version of that. Communication is looking at the messages that you can kind of elicit from your substance. One thing that I like to talk about is polarizing premises. Like, if you understand the substance of your business and what you're trying to like do for the world and help people to achieve in the world, there are going to be some things that you have to share that not everybody agrees with. A lot of people try and shy away from that stuff, especially if they've got a creative business and they're making YouTube videos, whatever it is. They don't always share like the messages that are going to have the most impact and that are going to resonate the most. But if you understand the things that are going to polarize, then you're more likely, obviously, to turn some people off, but you're also going to turn the right people on, and they're going to be able to relate to you. So communication is about getting those kind of messages out there. Again, go back to substance. And then community is like building a community around those values and the things that you're doing so that you can help people to build connections, which is ultimately what the community part should be about, I think.
I have a feeling so many people are going to be so interested to learn more about you, Oli. So you've got to tell everybody where they can find you and learn more about your work.
So my website is just my name, Oli Anderson. So Oli Anderson.co.uk. I'm on Instagram, although I haven't been posting that much on there recently, but people can send DMs on there. I've got a YouTube channel. If you search for my name, I'm on there. But yeah, the main point of contact is probably my website. I've got a podcast as well, I should say that. It's called Creative Status. It really is just about exploring what it means to be real. Like, how can we unblock ourselves in the way we've been talking about, using creativity as a vehicle in most cases. Although, to be honest, I've kind of deviated from the creativity thing a little bit, and I just end up focusing on the healing / realness, wholeness stuff. But anyway, yeah, that's available on all podcast platforms. That was a bit of a tongue twister. And yeah, Creative Status, that's what it's called. So
Excellent. Well, Oli Anderson, thank you so much for all of this incredible information that you've been able to share. It's really very important work that you're doing, and I so appreciate all of the things that you're doing to help people to find their real selves. And I know that your impact is extremely profound. You've definitely opened my eyes to a lot of different ideas and concepts. And so I'm really looking forward to other people getting to know you. Thank you so much for being a beautiful human.
Jennifer, thank you so much for just listening to me ramble about all this stuff and letting me come on your podcast. It's been awesome. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Human Beauty Movement podcast. Be sure to follow, rate, and review us wherever you stream podcasts. The Human Beauty Movement is a community-based platform that cultivates the beauty of humankind. Check out our workshops, find us on social media, and share our inspiration with all the beautiful humans in your life. Learn more at thehumanbeautymovement.com. Thank you so much for being a beautiful human.